Hi, my name is Kieffer. My project is understanding ionic gels through dielectric spectroscopy. What we want to study with this is kind of a new way to store energy in battery form. Currently we have lithium-ion batteries, and those are kind of outliving their use. We've seen that they've been kind of explosive. What we're trying to study is these new ionic liquids or molten salts that have very interesting properties like low vapor pressure, high ionic conductivity, and high thermal stability. So basically they won't blow up, and they should have the ability to store a lot of electrical energy because they are all ions. However, just a liquid isn't going to make a very good battery, so we need to suspend the liquid in some sort of superstructure, and for that we chose to use what's called a sol gel, which is made out of polymerization of tetramethyl orthosilicate, or TMOS. This TMOS reacts with formic acid to knock off one of the methyl groups. It creates a hydroxyl group, which then self-reacts with other hydroxylated TMOS molecules and then creates a silica-like backbone in a network that eventually creates a gel very similar to gelatin. Suspended in this gel is once again the ionic liquid. The ionic liquid we used in our study was called BMIM-BF4, or 1-butyl-3-methylamidazolium tetrafluoroborate. It consists of a large, both polar and with nonpolar characteristics, cation and a very small anion. The large size of the cation is very important for allowing the salts to remain in a liquid form. It prevents it from clumping up kind of like salt and becoming a solid. In the literature we found a 1 to 7.8 to 1% ratio was kind of the best, or 1 to 7.8 to 1 part ratio of TMOS, ionic liquid, and formic acid was the best for our gels. And so we went ahead and used that. To that, we added an open-air capacitor, which is basically just a bunch of nickel plates separated by less than a millimeter, which we were able to run current through. Using an LCR meter, we were able to measure the capacitance and the resistance, both in the open air and in the gels. And these are kind of what we measured. Through the capacitance and the resistance, we were able to get the dielectric constants of the gels at different frequencies, since we were using alternating current. The dielectric constant consists of both a real and imaginary part. The real part kind of describes the polarizability, or how much charge can be stored inside of the substance, while the imaginary part really has more to do with the dielectric loss over a period. What we're kind of hoping to see is that as the current is applied through the gel, the OH groups will align with the current. And as the current switches, it'll align the opposite direction. If the frequency is too high, they'll just waggle and won't actually be able to align with the current. If the frequency is too low, they'll align, and then there'll be a lot of time wasted. That's where we'll get a lot of dielectric loss, and then they'll switch. So what we're kind of trying to look for is an equilibrium middle ground where these hydroxyl groups will perfectly align, and that will kind of give us where the batteries will be most effective. What I did as my study was measure the development of the gel over time. So I poured the gel and took different measurements at different times to understand how the gel was developing. And we've got graphs of that for the real and imaginary part. An interesting thing is, before we even added the formic acid to kind of catalyze the reaction, there was some interaction between that increased all the constants, both the real and imaginary part. This probably occurred because there's some sort of self-reaction between the TMOS and water vapor in the air. So in the future, it'd be good to try to use maybe nitrogen or some sort of inert environment to prevent that sort of pre-reaction. After we added the formic acid, we had a huge jump in the real part of the dielectric constant, and it continued to grow over the next several days. The huge jump kind of indicates to me that the first reaction, where the formic acid is chopping off a methyl group, is occurring very rapidly. The TMOS is kind of becoming more polarized, and we can kind of store more charge in the liquid. The imaginary part showed the same sort of growth before the ionic liquid was added, when it was just reacting with the water vapor in the air, but when we added the formic acid, it didn't have the same jump up that the real part had, which makes me think that the water in the air reacted a lot of the molecules and got at least one hydroxyl group on there, and then the formic acid actually just added another hydroxyl group that didn't necessarily affect how the molecule was polarized, and kind of leads me to believe that the second reaction is occurring more slowly, and that E double prime is kind of measuring how the second reaction progresses. At the end of the study, we do have some values that the values for both the real and imaginary part. Those aren't really necessarily the most important parts of the study. What really is the most important part is kind of seeing how they've evolved, what did what we expect happen occur, or did it not. Here we expected it to grow, both of the constants to grow with the addition of formic acid and over time. We didn't quite expect the imaginary part to not grow with the formic acid, so that was definitely interesting to see. Since after a while, after about 2 or 3 days, we do see some oxidation occurring in the gels. So as I mentioned earlier, it might be a good idea to try to perform this in an inert environment that could control for those sort of factors. This is only one small step in the hope that soon we'll be able to have a way where we can store all this environmentally friendly green energy. And we certainly have a long way to go, but hopefully this is a small part towards getting to that ultimate goal of being able to save those energies and have a new form of sustainable battery.